Pyongyang has a new fault line and it runs straight through the heart of the ruling party. The moment Kim Jong-un's daughter Kim Joo-ae began appearing at official state events, North Korea's inner circle quietly began choosing sides. On one end a new succession line. On the other Kim Yo-jong, who controls the party and the military. History tells us how this regime handles power struggles. Jang Song-thak was executed. Kim Jong-nam was assassinated at an airport. The man you're about to hear from was inside the building when the fractures began and he got out before the settling of accounts began. Join us in standing up for human rights. Subscribe to hear more stories of freedom, stories the world needs to hear. That morning, the document that should have been on my desk was gone. It was a military report I had been handling myself until the day before. When I asked the person in charge, all I got was that the routing had changed. No one said when. No one said whose order it was. I didn't ask twice. In this system, asking twice was enough to draw suspicion. I walked back to my desk, stared at the empty surface, and knew this wasn't a simple administrative adjustment. I worked as an administrative aide under the Korean Workers' Party Organization and Guidance Department in Pyongyang. My job was to manage senior officials' schedules, sort internal documents, and make sure reports moved through the proper channels. I had no decision-making authority, but I could see the flow. And being able to see the flow meant that when the flow changed, I was the first to notice and the first to be suspected. It was around that time that reports from the military and the party's core departments began routing through separate channels. At first, it was only a few. But the scope widened. The volume of documents crossing my desk was shrinking. Around the same time, Kim Jong-un's public appearances dropped sharply. When he did appear, something was different. Inside the organization, no one mentioned it. Whispers about his health floated around, barely audible, but whoever brought it up quickly changed the subject. Even uttering the supreme leader's health was grounds for punishment. That's when Kim Joo-ae began appearing at official events, again and again. At first, she simply stood beside her father. But with each appearance, her position shifted. The coverage around her grew. Inside Pyongyang, no one said it out loud. But senior officials were already reacting with their behavior, not their words. Meetings stretched longer with more sideways glances. Even longtime acquaintances were seeing each other less. Between Kim Yo-jong's line deeply embedded in the party and the military and this new current forming around Kim Joo-ae, officials had quietly begun running their calculations. As the loyalty competition intensified, I started feeling something strange. The sense that someone was watching me. In the conference room, in the hallway, in the cafeteria, I'd look around and see no one. But the feeling never left. I hadn't chosen a side. That wasn't the problem. The problem was that someone had already chosen my side for me. I thought I was organizing documents. I was already on the list of people to be organized. One evening over dinner, a senior official I'd known for years set down his glass and asked quietly, "These days, which side are you on?" I didn't answer. How you responded to a question like that was already a choice. I changed the subject. After that night, we never sat at the same table again. It became impossible to tell who was avoiding whom. Two currents were forming inside Pyongyang. One was a new succession line forming around Kim Joo-ae. The other was Kim Yo-jong's line, rooted deep in the party and military. Nothing had been formally decided. But officials were already moving. Those who had survived this system the longest understood you had to choose before you were forced to. Kim Yo-jong controlled the party's core departments. Her influence reached into every corner of the military. Kim Joo-ae, on the other hand, had just passed 10 years old. There were signs she was receiving succession training, but she had no real political foundation. The wider the gap between the two lines, the faster people moved to fill it. The moment I felt the danger in my body, not my head, my body, was when I was assigned to compile a specific list of names. No one explained what kind of list it was. But the moment I saw the names on it, no explanation was necessary. Someone who had worked in the same building as me until 3 months ago was on that list. I knew which side he had chosen. And I knew that the person now writing his name down was me. In this system, there are only two kinds of people: those who are useful, and those who know too much. Until that moment, I had thought I was the first kind. My hands were trembling. I couldn't stop. Stopping would have looked suspicious. So I kept writing. As I copied each name, a thought settled in. Once this document went up the chain, the fate of the person who compiled it was likely already decided. Those who know too much don't get kept around. When I handed over the document at the end of that session, I understood I was no longer someone who worked there. I was someone who could be removed. 3 days later, my superior called me in. A private meeting, no reason given, just the two of us in the room. When I entered, he was looking down at papers on his desk. He didn't look up. After a moment, he asked whether I was having any difficulties with my workload lately. An ordinary question, but he never explained why he was asking it now, or why he'd called me in separately. I said no. He nodded and lowered his eyes back to the papers. That was the end of the meeting. Walking out into the hallway, my legs went weak. Nothing had been said, but something had been decided in that room. My body knew it before my mind could catch up. The day after the list was finished, the document left my hands. A few days later, one of the names I had written down didn't come to work. The desk was empty. No one asked about it. Neither did I. That evening at dinner, I set down my spoon. I couldn't swallow. That person and I had handled the same documents. We had sat in the same meetings. We had received orders from the same superior. I thought of the day Jang Song-thak was executed. I was still a low-level staffer at the time. Jang Song-thak was Kim Jong-un's uncle by marriage at the very center of power. Executed for treason, and it didn't end there. People were investigated simply for having shared a meal with him. Others were banished to the provinces for no more than a handshake. Proximity itself became a crime. Now, the desk beside mine was empty. Kim Jong-nam's case was different. He never set foot on North Korean soil. He was abroad, and he was assassinated at an airport. Blood ties didn't protect him. Distance didn't protect him. When this system decided someone had to disappear, it didn't matter where they were. That reality was now overlapping with mine. I was inside Pyongyang. I had compiled the list. I had touched the same documents as someone who was gone. Outside, analysts called it a power transition. Inside, the purge had already begun. The expressions of people I passed in conference rooms were changing. Fewer words, shallower smiles, eyes moving faster, scanning, calculating, giving nothing away. The same room held people trying to read others and people trying not to be read. I was in that room. I had compiled the list. I had sorted the documents. I knew which path reports took on their way up. I knew that a serious succession struggle always triggers internal purges. And I knew what happened to people who knew too much once that purge began. The question that entered my mind never left. Was it still safe for me to be here? It followed me before sleep, on the walk to work, beneath my hands as I sorted papers. One morning I came in and stopped in the middle of the hallway. The desk right next to mine was empty. Drawers cleared out, everything that had been on the surface gone. The person who had been reviewing documents with me the day before. No one asked. I didn't ask. I walked back to my seat and sat down. My hands wouldn't move. I stared at the screen and saw nothing. From that day, my body changed. When footsteps echoed in the hallway, my shoulders locked before I could think. When someone called my name, my heart lurched a beat ahead. At night, sleep wouldn't come. I lay on my back staring at the ceiling. The smallest sound pulled me awake. When footsteps passed outside my door, I held my breath. When they faded, I let it go. That cycle repeated through every night. One evening, walking back to my quarters, I let a word surface in my mind for the first time. Defection. I tried to push it back down immediately. It wouldn't go. Once a thought like that comes up, it doesn't go back. If I stayed, I might be the next one to disappear. If I ran, I might be caught. I weighed those two fears against each other, and at some point, one of them stopped feeling as heavy. That was the decision, not logic. My body made it first. Finding someone I could trust took time. Approaching the wrong person could get me reported on the spot. Among the colleagues I had known for years, I carefully thought back to anyone who had let slip, even once, that they wanted to leave Pyongyang. One night, in a place where no one else was around, I brought it up first. The person was quiet for a long time. Then they nodded. In that moment, I knew I had crossed a line I couldn't come back from. I was afraid, but staying on the other side of that line meant disappearing a different way. There was no going back. Once the departure date was set, time moved differently. I went to work, sorted documents, reported to my superior, but all of it felt like it belonged to another world. On the surface, nothing could change. No shift in expression, no change in behavior. I smiled the same way, nodded the same way, held my position the same way. And beneath all of it, I was running the broker's route through my head again and again. One mistake and there was no correcting it. So I rehearsed it dozens of times before it happened. The colleague who would leave with me worked in the same department. He had made his decision before I had. He found the broker first. I came in through him. He was a quiet man, and in the days before we left, he went quieter still. When we passed each other in the hallway, we exchanged nothing but a look. We both knew we were heading the same direction, but no words were needed to confirm it. That was safer, and in those circumstances, it was the only form of trust available to us. Getting out of Pyongyang was the first gate. Movement required a travel permit. The broker had forged the documents, but if the checkpoint caught anything wrong, it was over on the spot. As the soldier examined our papers, I held my breath. The seconds stretched. The documents came back, a hand gesture pass. Only then did I exhale. I didn't look at my colleague. No relief on the face, no reaction. Even after we cleared the checkpoint, neither of us spoke for a long time. We reached the Tumen River deep in the night. The broker had mapped out the patrol intervals when the lights went dark, which direction the guards would come from, how the signal from the Chinese side would be given. Move the moment the signal comes, he said. Every extra second is a risk. But standing at the riverbank, the plan dissolved. The river was narrower than I'd imagined, and my feet wouldn't move. My body already understood what crossing it meant. There was no coming back from the other side. My colleague stepped in first. I watched his back, then lifted my foot. The water was cold, and the stones beneath were slick. No sound. Even my breathing I kept to nothing. Somewhere near the middle, a light moved in the distance. Patrol or not, I had no way of knowing. I kept walking, eyes fixed on the far bank, feet feeling through the current, breath held as still as I could hold it. The light moved away, or maybe I did. When I stepped onto Chinese soil, I felt nothing. Not relief, not joy, just what comes next. The broker was waiting. We followed him into the dark without a word. I didn't look back. There was nothing left to see. And what lay ahead, I couldn't yet know. All I could do was walk. Setting foot in China didn't change anything. This wasn't freedom. It was a different kind of fear, one without a fixed direction. In North Korea, at least you knew where the danger was coming from. In China, it could come from anywhere. Anyone could be a threat. The broker took us to a small farmhouse. No windows in the room. During the day, we couldn't go outside. Voices had to stay low. If someone reported us to Chinese authorities, we'd be sent back immediately. Repatriation to North Korea meant a detention camp. We both knew that. So we did what we were told, stayed quiet inside that room, and waited for the broker to come. Every time we moved, the broker asked for more money. There had been an agreed amount, but additional costs kept appearing. This stretch is dangerous, he'd say. Checkpoints are stricter. We need a different route. And the price would shift. We couldn't refuse. We were already in his hands. We signed agreements to pay once we reached South Korea. What those agreements might be used for later, we didn't understand yet. Movement happened mostly at night. We crouched in the back of trucks or hid ourselves between freight. From Kunming in Yunnan province to Jinghong, we barely spoke. We pressed our bodies low in the shaking cargo hold, and every time a checkpoint approached, we went still. The truck would stop. In those seconds, it felt like my heart stopped too. When the truck started moving again, I breathed. At one point during transit, my colleague developed a fever. Days of poor food and constant movement in cramped spaces had broken him down. There was no medicine. The broker said there was no time, we had to keep moving. My colleague said nothing. His face had gone pale, but he never once asked to stop. Watching him, I understood again how desperately he needed to get out. When we reached the area near the Mohan border crossing, the broker told us next was Laos. Cross into Laos and we could reach Thailand. But he added Laos has an agreement with North Korea. If caught, you'd be sent back immediately. Hearing that, I understood once more that I couldn't see the end of this road yet. Leaving China, crossing Laos, reaching Thailand, every one of these was a gate we hadn't passed. We had to clear them one by one. There was no other option. Before we crossed into Laos, the broker drilled it into us one more time: don't speak. Not a word. The moment local police picked us up, the repatriation process would begin. Caught in China, caught in Laos, the destination was the same. A detention camp. Walking that reality through my mind again, I felt how thin the line was that we were moving along. Crossing the Mohan border meant bypassing the official checkpoint, moving through mountain trails instead. The broker led, we followed. In the dark jungle, branches caught our clothes and footing gave way again and again. No sounds. Even when you fell, you swallowed it. When my colleague twisted his ankle, he clenched his jaw and got back up without a sound. We couldn't stop. The broker didn't look back. Once inside Laos, we moved by car. An old vehicle driven by the broker's contact. We lay flat on the floor of the back seat. Laos passed in glimpses through windows we couldn't raise our heads to see properly. Every time the car stopped, the tension rose. Was it a police checkpoint or an ordinary stop? We held still until the broker signaled we were clear. We reached the Mekong River in the early hours before dawn. Thailand was on the other side. The broker had arranged a small boat. His contact was at the oars. We lay flat in the hull. The Mekong was wider than the Tumen. The current moved faster. Each time the boat rocked, everything in me went rigid, but there was no sound to make. On the water, there was nothing to do but hold on. When we stepped onto Thai soil, the broker told us, from here, walk until you find police. Tell them you're North Korean defectors. Thailand doesn't send defectors back. Whether that was true, we had no way to verify. We had no choice but to believe it. We hadn't walked far when we came across Thai police. I raised my hands. I said we were North Korean defectors. The moment those words left my mouth, everything I had been holding together, all of it gave way at once. My legs lost their strength. Beside me, my colleague had bowed his head. The Thai police took us to an immigration detention center. There were bars. But strangely, it didn't frighten me. This wasn't North Korea. It wasn't China. It wasn't Laos. A few days later, word came that the Korean embassy had been contacted. That was the first moment I truly felt that the end was close. About a month later, we boarded a flight to South Korea. I looked out the window and still couldn't quite believe it. I closed my eyes quietly. The day we arrived in South Korea, what I noticed first was the airport floor, how polished it was. Strange thing to register. People moved quickly all around me, and no one was watching anyone else with suspicion. No one calculating, no one holding their words back, no one running checks on their surroundings. That ordinary scene felt foreign to me. In Pyongyang, I had never seen anyone move through a public space with that kind of ease. After the arrival procedures, there were interviews. Where had I come from, which route, what had I done in North Korea? There was nothing to hide. I told them what I knew and what I'd seen, that I had worked in the organization and guidance department, that something had shifted the day the reporting chain changed, that the morning I found the empty desk beside mine was the morning I made my decision. The interviewer wrote it all down. And as I spoke, the memories began to feel like they belonged to someone else. A phone came a few days after the interviews. My first one. I learned how to turn it on, how to save numbers. That evening, an unknown number sent me a message, a Chinese bank account, and an amount matching what was in the agreement I'd signed. The broker. There was also a line about what would happen to people I'd left behind in North Korea if I didn't pay. Even freedom came with a price attached. That was fine. It was a debt I could work off. I learned South Korean life at a settlement support facility. How to take the bus. How to buy things at a grocery store. How to open a bank account. At first, everything was unfamiliar. The choices overwhelmed me. At the supermarket, the same item lined the shelves in dozens of versions, and I'd stand there for a long time just looking. In Pyongyang, there were no choices, you received what was given. So at first, having to choose felt exhausting. But it wasn't a bad kind of tired. My colleague adapted faster than I did. Picked up the language more quickly, found work first. Messages came from him occasionally, nothing significant. Did you eat? Where are you living? That kind of thing. Sometimes it didn't feel real that the person who had crossed the Tumen River with me and I were now exchanging texts in Seoul. But those days kept accumulating, quietly. The last days in Pyongyang come back sometimes. The empty desk. The document that vanished. The question asked in a low voice over dinner. Some nights those scenes show up in dreams. I wake and the ceiling is unfamiliar, and for a moment I don't know where I am. Then I remember. And that's okay. This isn't a place I wake up afraid of. That alone is enough. Thank you for staying with this story to the end. I hope something of what it's like inside North Korea, what people living there go through, what they endure to survive, has reached you. If this kind of story matters to you, please subscribe and hit like. Just having you here on this channel means everything. Thank you.